My name is Ava Sterling, and when this story begins, I was 27 years old, standing on the precipice of everything I had fought for. Just an hour earlier, I had walked across the stage at Harvard Medical School, clutching the diploma that confirmed I was officially Dr. Ava Sterling, the first physician in a family defined by the old money Boston financial elite. The scene of my supposed triumph was the private dining room of the Hawthorne Club, a venue steeped in mahogany and ancestral portraits in downtown Boston, the kind of place my parents, Victoria and Arthur, frequented to flaunt their status. The room smelled of aged leather and unforgiving judgment. I was dressed in a crisp ivory gown, a champagne flute held high, ready to make a toast. This was supposed to be the moment they finally acknowledged the decade of sacrifice, the crushing $310,000 in debt, and the sheer grit it took to achieve this degree without a dime of their financial help. My parents and two older brothers, Damon and Preston, were seated at the head table. Damon, 3 years my senior, the high-powered corporate lawyer who made partner at his firm by 32. Preston, the tech millionaire who sold his first company before he turned 40. They were the golden standard, the embodiment of my family's relentless pursuit of wealth and prestige. And I was the anomaly, the idealist who had stubbornly chosen medicine, the one who worked 3 jobs through college, lived on caffeine and debt, while my brothers sailed through life on trust funds and family connections. I had been the family outsider, the difficult one, the perpetual disappointment for 27 years. Now I thought that was over. I had earned my place. I opened my mouth to speak, and that's when the blade came down. My mother, Victoria, didn't wait for the room to quiet. She leaned across the pristine white linen tablecloth, her diamond earrings sparkling under the chandelier, and a dismissive, icy smile, the one I'd known since childhood, stretched across her face. Her voice, usually carefully modulated for public spaces, cut through the celebratory air like shattered glass. "Honestly, Ava," she said, loud enough for the tables nearby to pause their chatter, "we wish you were never born." The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was deafening. The kind of silence where you can hear the faint chamber music coming from the next room, the rattle of a distant ice bucket, the frantic pounding of your own heart against your ribs. My father, Arthur, didn't flinch. He simply nodded in agreement, that familiar vein throbbing at his temple, a sure sign that he was perfectly comfortable with his wife's cruelty. My brothers, Damon and Preston, exchanged smug, knowing glances, a silent confirmation. There goes Ava, causing a scene again. In that single, agonizing moment, 27 years of feeling small, unworthy, and perpetually disappointing crystallized. I remembered Damon's European luxury car being bought with family money while I took out those enormous loans. I remembered Preston getting a silent funding round for his startup while I worked graveyard shifts as a medical scribe. They had always measured me against their scale of corporate success, and I, Ava, the future doctor who chose to heal people instead of maximizing profits, always came up short. The champagne glass began to tremble in my hand. But a strange thing happened. Instead of the wave of humiliation and hot tears I was conditioned to feel, a profound, icy clarity washed over me. The pain wasn't new. What was new was the realization that I was done allowing it. This wasn't just toxic, this was malignant. I carefully, meticulously, placed the trembling glass back onto the table. I looked at my mother, then my father, then my brothers, meeting each of their expectant, slightly bored stares. "Consider it done," I said, my voice low and steady, a tone I didn't know I possessed. "Consider me as if I never existed." Live your lives as though there was never a daughter named Ava. I didn't wait for their reaction. As my Aunt Susan's fork clattered loudly onto her plate, drawing even more attention, my mother let out that familiar, dismissive scoff. "Don't be dramatic, Ava. Sit down." She waved her hand, shooing away my entire existence like a minor inconvenience. But I didn't sit. I reached up to the chain around my neck and unclasped the delicate gold heirloom necklace. It was my grandmother Eleanor's, given to me years ago despite Victoria's insistence it should go to a more deserving grandchild. The gold felt cool in my palm. I placed it gently next to my untouched plate. Then I removed the silver bracelet my father had given me for my undergraduate graduation, inscribed "To our daughter." A bitter joke, I thought. I set it next to the necklace. "What are you doing?" My mother's voice finally held an edge of alarm, sensing a loss of control. I looked at the four of them, suits, designer watches, country club status, and felt an utter lack of connection. I had paid my own tuition, worked my own shifts, and fought my own battles. They had done nothing but take credit and administer abuse. "You wished I was never born," I repeated, the words tasting like freedom. "I'm granting your wish. As of this moment, you have no daughter named Ava. I don't exist to you. Live your lives exactly as you want without me in them." My friend, Schuyler, who was seated beside me and whose face was a mask of shocked fury, grabbed my arm. "Ava, wait." I squeezed her hand reassuringly. "I'm okay, Schuyler. I promise." And the strange thing was, I meant it. I walked out of that expensive, stifling restaurant without a single glance back. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I simply walked, one foot in front of the other, through the gawking diners, past the hostess stand, and out into the cool, liberating Boston evening air. I drove 3 blocks before my hands started shaking violently. I drove to my tiny new studio apartment, the one I'd just leased near St. Jude's Medical Center, where my residency was set to begin in 3 weeks. Everything was finally coming together. Everything was planned. I sat on my second-hand couch, pulled out my phone, and one by one blocked their numbers. Victoria, Arthur, Damon, Preston. Then I blocked them across all social media. Finally, I opened my email and typed one last message to all 4 of them. "You wished I was never born. Your wish is granted. I no longer exist to you. Do not contact me. Do not reach out. We're done." I hit send. The weight that lifted off my shoulders wasn't just relief. It was a physical sensation, the shedding of an entire lifetime's burden. I actually smiled. For the first time in my entire adult life, I felt truly, terrifyingly, wonderfully free. I knew this was the end of one life, but I couldn't have imagined the hell I would have to endure before the new one could begin. The feeling of absolute freedom, that intoxicating rush I'd felt after hitting send, lasted exactly 4 hours. My phone started buzzing, not from them, they were blocked, but from the collateral damage. Aunt Susan called twice. Cousin Emily sent 7 frantic texts, and Uncle George left a confused, worried voicemail. It was the predictable family scramble. What happened? Your mother is so upset. Families shouldn't fight like this. They operated on the principle that the person who walks away is always the dramatic culprit, regardless of the years of abuse that preceded the exit. I ignored them all. My focus narrowed to the clean slate I had just given myself. I slept through the night for the first time in months, not plagued by nightmares of failed exams or disappointing my parents. I woke up on a Tuesday feeling rested, The quiet studio apartment an oasis compared to the suffocating silence of my childhood home. I spent the morning unpacking boxes, the scent of fresh paint and possibility filling the air. The reality check arrived at 11:30 a.m. in the form of an email notification on my laptop. The sender was Dr. Evelyn Shaw, the residency program director at St. Jude's Medical Center. The subject line read, "Urgent, regarding your residency position." My blood turned to ice water. My stomach dropped violently. What? I opened it with shaking fingers. The short, crisp professional language was more terrifying than any scream. "Dr. Sterling, please contact my office immediately to schedule a meeting before your start date. A matter has come to our attention that requires discussion." A matter. That single word seemed to grow on the screen, vast and ominous. I had completed all paperwork past all requirements and was set to start in less than 2 weeks. What could possibly go wrong? I pushed away the flickering thought that this might be connected to my family. That was paranoia, wasn't it? They couldn't possibly reach into my professional life, my career, my future, could they? I called the office as soon as I could breathe again. The administrative assistant, who had been so warm and welcoming just weeks prior, now sounded cold and distant. "Dr. Shaw can see you at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Please be on time." I arrived at St. Jude's 45 minutes early, sitting in my beat-up sedan in the parking lot, reciting my medical knowledge in a desperate attempt to calm my breathing. Had I misfiled my licensing? Had a background check turned up an old speeding ticket? My mind frantically searched for a logical, professional reason for this meeting, but kept hitting a dead end. At exactly 2 p.m., I walked into Dr. Shaw's office. She was a formidable woman in her late 50s, impeccably dressed, with sharp eyes that had seen every facet of human crisis in her long career. "Thank you for coming in, Ava," she said, gesturing to the chair. Her voice was professional, but I detected a thread of something unsettling, not anger, but concerned disappointment. "Of course, Dr. Shaw. Your email said there was a matter to discuss." She opened a folder, the sound of the papers rustling horribly loud. "We received some communications over the past few days that have raised significant concerns with our administration and, frankly, the hospital board." My heart began to hammer against my ribs. What kind of communications? "Anonymous emails and phone calls to multiple board members," she continued, not meeting my eyes. "They reported concerns about your character, your stability, and your fitness for the pressures of a medical residency." I felt a physical blow to my chest. What? Dr. Shaw slid several printouts of emails across the desk. I forced myself to read the screen. They described an incident at a public dinner where I had allegedly had a breakdown, violently screamed obscenities at my family members, threw heirloom jewelry in a fit of unstable rage, and stormed out in a manner described by multiple witnesses as completely unhinged. The blood drained from my face. This was twisted, fabricated garbage. The quiet dignity of my exit had been weaponized and morphed into a grotesque, career-ending tantrum. "This is not true," I whispered, my voice shaking uncontrollably. "Dr. Shaw, that is not what happened at all. Yes, there was an incident at my graduation dinner, but my family said something incredibly hurtful to me. I simply removed the jewelry they had given me, placed it on the table, and left. I didn't throw anything, I didn't scream, and I was perfectly calm." She studied my face, her sharp eyes searching for any hint of deceit. "Can anyone corroborate your version of events, Ava?" "Yes. My friend Schuyler was there. several classmates, at least a dozen people saw exactly what happened. My words tumbled out, fast and desperate. Dr. Shaw, I truly believe my family is behind these complaints. We had a severe falling out that night, and I cut off contact with them. I think they are trying to punish me. She was silent for a long moment, the clinical, professional wall she'd erected beginning to crack. Ava, I want to believe you. Your academic record is exemplary. Your professors speak highly of you, and your clinical rotations were outstanding. But, she inhaled slowly, the hospital administration is deeply concerned about drama, about family instability affecting your performance. Several board members are pushing to rescind your position entirely. My entire career, the 8 years of blood, sweat, and $310,000 in loans, was crumbling right in front of me. Please, Dr. Shaw, please don't do this. I can prove what really happened. I can get written statements from my friends. She nodded, a slight softening in her gaze. I fought for you, Ava. Here's what I was able to negotiate. You can start your residency as planned, but you will be on probationary status for the first 6 months. Any complaints, any issues, any incidents whatsoever, and your position will be immediately terminated. No second chances. You have to be perfect. It was humiliating, unfair, and a tight leash around my neck, but it was a lifeline. I understand. Thank you, Dr. Shaw. Thank you for fighting for me. As I walked out, I knew this wasn't paranoia. This was calculated warfare. I had won the first round by walking away, but my family was fighting back with a vengeance, aiming not just for my pride, but for my entire professional existence. I left St. Jude's Medical Center that afternoon feeling nauseous, but also infused with a grim, determined fury. They wanted to play dirty? Fine. I would document everything and build my defense. The first call I made was to Skylar. Ava, what is wrong? You sound awful, she answered immediately. I poured out the entire horrifying story, the anonymous emails, the fabricated claims of screaming and unstable rage, the probationary status. Skylar was instantly furious. That's insane. That's defamation. I'll write a statement right now. I'll get everyone else who was there to write them too. We'll show them exactly what happened. This is absolutely unhinged. True to her word, within 48 hours I had detailed, sworn written statements from Skylar and 3 other medical school classmates who had attended the dinner. They all confirmed the same thing. I had been quiet, calm, and had left peacefully. No screaming, no instability, just a devastating, quiet exit. I submitted everything to the hospital administration, along with a formal complaint detailing the nature of the false reports. I felt a surge of defiant hope. I was fighting back. But I should have known better than to believe the attacks would stop there. The family pressure machine, which had been buzzing with confused, polite inquiries, suddenly ramped up its venom. The messages from extended family escalated from "we should talk" to thinly veiled condemnations. My father's sister, Aunt Carol, texted, "Your mother is hysterical. You owe her an apology, Ava. This is cruel." My cousin, who I barely knew, posted a vague but pointed quote on social media about ungrateful children. They were isolating me, feeding the narrative that I was the troubled daughter who had abandoned her loving, distressed parents. I was beginning to feel that suffocating darkness closing in again. I was spending all my time fighting administrative battles, compiling legal evidence, and battling crippling anxiety, instead of preparing for the career I had worked a decade to achieve. And then a different kind of call came. My phone screen displayed the number of my grandmother Eleanor, 81 years old, living independently in her home on Beacon Hill. She was a sharp, fiercely intelligent woman who had always seen through the family's superficial drama. I hesitated, then answered. "Ava, sweetheart." Her voice was warm, steady, and utterly without judgment. "I heard what happened. I'm so proud of you." I almost dropped the phone. "Grandma, what did you say?" "I said, 'Good for you,'" she repeated firmly. "I watched your mother treat you like garbage your whole life. It was about time someone stood up to her. Are you okay, baby?" That was it. That simple, unqualified validation, coming from the matriarch of the family, broke me. I started to cry, real, ugly, body-shaking sobs, the kind I hadn't allowed myself since I walked out of that restaurant. I think so, Grandma," I choked out. "They're trying to destroy my career." "I know. Your Aunt Susan told me everything, including the lies your mother is spreading about you throwing things. She even called me, trying to get me to agree that you were unstable." Eleanor's tone hardened. "I told her I was ashamed of her. I told her she's crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. She is desperate, Ava, and desperate people do ugly things." We talked for an hour. She didn't offer financial help. She offered something far more valuable: moral clarity and unconditional love. She made me feel less alone, less crazy and utterly justified. The brief moment of comfort ended abruptly the next morning. I woke up to a text from Skylar. "Ava, your mom is trying to reach you through me. She sent me a message to pass along to you. Do you want to hear it?" My heart sank. I knew exactly what was coming. The ultimatum. "What does it say?" I texted back, my fingers tense. "She says if you don't apologize and come back, there will be consequences. Not an apology, not remorse, not even a feigned worry for my well-being. A threat, a stark confirmation that this was a deliberate campaign. The probationary status, the false reports, this was all leverage." I stared at the text for a long time. Apologize for what? For having boundaries? For not letting them exploit me anymore? Tell her I said no. I typed back, the defiance a steel rod in my spine. "And Skylar, please don't pass along any more messages from her. Block her if you have to. I can't have this conduit." "Done," Skylar replied instantly. "I won't. I'm here if you need anything. Love you." I turned off my phone, went to my kitchen, and made myself the strongest coffee I could manage. The battle was no longer just about my career. It was about my survival. I was fighting against people who had convinced themselves they were entitled to my life, and they would stop at nothing to drag me back into their orbit. I knew they wouldn't stop with the hospital. I needed to move fast to get ahead of the next attack, but I had no idea what form it would take. The terrifying reality was that my wealthy, powerful family had unlimited resources to dismantle my life brick by brick, while I was an exhausted, financially stretched resident-to-be, sleeping on a couch and facing the biggest challenge of my life alone, save for the incredible support of a fierce old woman and a loyal friend. The next attack came 2 days later, and it was a direct hit on the most basic human needs: shelter and financial stability. I woke up to an unknown number ringing my phone. My heart hammered with premonition, but I answered anyway. "Hello. Is this Ava?" "This is Ralph Sanders, the landlord of the apartment you're renting on Oak Street in the city." My mouth went instantly dry. "Yes, Mr. Sanders. What can I do for you?" "I'm calling to inform you that your lease is being terminated, effective immediately. I've already rented the unit to someone else. You have 72 hours to vacate." I sprang up from the couch I was sitting on. "What? You can't do that, Mr. Sanders. I have a signed lease. I paid first and last month's rent and the security deposit just 3 weeks ago." Ms. Sterling, you provided false information on your application. I received a call from your previous landlord stating that you were evicted for property damage and unpaid rent. That is fraud, and it voids the lease immediately. I felt a surge of white-hot disbelief. That is categorically untrue. I have never been evicted. I left my last apartment on good terms with the landlord, Mr. Lopez. Who called you? I'm not at liberty to say, but the information was incredibly detailed and came from what seemed like a credible source with intimate knowledge of your rental history. I've already made my decision, Miss Sterling. 72 hours. I'll mail your deposit back once I've inspected for damages. He hung up before I could argue further. I stood there in the living room of my own apartment, or what I thought was my own apartment, the one piece of furniture I owned sitting sadly in the middle of the empty space. Someone had gone through the effort of finding my new landlord, fabricating a detailed history of eviction and fraud, and convincing him to terminate my contract. Damon, the lawyer, or Preston, the tech genius who knew how to manipulate data. It had to be one of them, using their skills to systematically dismantle my life. I immediately called Skylar, who offered me her couch again. You can stay as long as you need, Ava. Seriously, don't even worry about it. I just need to find another place, I whispered, overwhelmed. I start my residency in a few days. I can't be sleeping on a couch. I spent the next 2 days frantically apartment hunting between packing my few belongings. Everything required a significant upfront cost. First month, last month, security deposit. I had the money, though. My savings account, diligently built over years of working multiple jobs, held just over $18,000, my emergency fund for residency. On the third day, the day I was supposed to move my boxes to Skylar's place, I decided to pay for a hotel room for one night just to get a good, quiet sleep before the chaos of residency began. I walked up to the counter, handed over my debit card, and watched the cashier's face fall. I'm sorry, ma'am. This card was declined. I tried to smile, thinking it was a glitch. I'm sorry, let me try this one. I pulled out my credit card. Also declined, ma'am. I stumbled back from the counter, my entire life packed into my car outside. I sat on a lobby bench and opened my banking app on my phone. The screen screamed at me. Account under review. Access temporarily restricted. Please contact customer service. My hands shook so hard I could barely dial the number. After an excruciating 15 minutes of generic hold music, a representative finally answered. My accounts are frozen, I said, my voice tight and thin. Both checking and savings. I need to know why now. Let me pull up your account, Ms. Sterling. Can you verify your social security number and date of birth? I rattled off the information, panic rising in my throat. I see. Your account has been flagged for suspicious activity and potential identity theft. The fraud department has placed a temporary hold pending investigation. Identity theft? I haven't reported any identity theft. Who reported it? I'm not able to see those specific details, but according to the notes, multiple suspicious transactions were flagged, and someone contacted us with concerns. The investigation will take 7 to 10 business days. 7 to 10 business days. My residency started in 2. I need access to my money now. I'm about to be homeless. I'm starting a new job. I have bills to pay. I felt tears of sheer helplessness sting my eyes. I understand your frustration, Ms. Sterling, but for your protection, we need to complete the investigation. Is there anything else I can help you with today? I wanted to scream, to cry, to smash the phone into the marble floor. Instead, I said no thank you and hung up. I checked my wallet. $85 in crumpled bills. That was it. That was all I had access to in the world. $18,000. The money I'd scraped together over years of exhaustion. The buffer I needed for the grueling, low-paying first year of residency was locked away. I was an honors graduate from one of the best medical schools in the country, a future doctor, and in 2 days I would be starting a highly demanding job with $85, no home, and a family that was systematically attempting to starve me out. I drove to Skylar's apartment in a daze. When I told her what happened, she was speechless, then absolutely livid. "Okay, Ava. Okay. My couch is yours. We'll figure this out. I'm lending you my debit card right now for essentials." That night, lying on Skylar's surprisingly comfortable couch, I filed fraud reports with the bank and a police report about the targeted harassment. The attacks were professional, anonymous, and untraceable, confirming that my powerful, vindictive family was operating with surgical precision, determined to destroy every last piece of the life I had built without them. The next day, I started my residency. Despite having less than $85 to my name and sleeping on a friend's sofa, I put on the one professional outfit I owned. A decent black suit that now looked a little worn, and my old, comfortable sneakers because I couldn't afford new ones. I drove to St. Jude's Medical Center on fumes, praying the quarter tank of gas would last the week. I showed up. I was exhausted, stressed, and terrified, but I walked in, completed my orientation, met my fellow residents, and started my first shift in the emergency department. And the moment I stepped into the chaos of the ED, the anxiety receded. It was replaced by a familiar, powerful clarity. This was my element. This was what I had worked for. I was good. I was really good. I moved with confidence, assessing, stabilizing, making quick, informed decisions. The attending physician, Dr. Marcus Reynolds, a notoriously tough mentor, even pulled me aside to commend my excellent work with a difficult trauma patient. For that brief, exhilarating shift, I felt hope surge through me. Maybe, just maybe, I could outrun the malice. Maybe my professional competency would be the shield I needed. During my 30-minute lunch break, I checked my phone. The euphoria vanished instantly. There was a message from Dr. Shaw's secretary. "Dr. Shaw needs to see you in her office immediately." My legs felt like jelly as I walked back to the administrative wing. "It's too soon," I thought frantically. "I haven't even been here a full day." Dr. Shaw looked grave, tired, and deeply regretful. "Ava, please sit down. I'm so sorry. I fought for you, I really did." "What happened?" I barely managed to speak the words. She sighed, running a hand through her impeccably neat gray hair. "The hospital received yet another anonymous communication this morning. This one is far more serious than the last. It claims you falsified parts of your medical school application, specifically alleging that you plagiarized data from a research project in your 3rd year." I felt dizzy, the room tilting violently. "That's not true. None of that is true. I know my work is clean." "I know, or at least I believe you," she said, her voice dropping with sympathy. "Your record here, even from the brief time we've had you, has been exemplary. But the hospital administration has no choice. Ava, we have to investigate, and until that investigation is complete, you are suspended from the residency program, effective immediately." Suspended. The word felt like a death sentence. For how long? I don't know. It could be weeks. It could be longer. They need to coordinate with your medical school dean's office to verify the allegations. Her expression was one of profound sadness. "I truly am sorry, Ava. They've suggested you reapply next year." Next year. A whole year lost. A black mark terminated residency position under investigation that would follow me forever. My family hadn't just tried to hurt me. They were systematically trying to erase my entire professional identity, piece by piece. I walked out of the hospital in my scrubs, carrying my street clothes in a bag, got into my car, and just sat there unable to cry, too shocked to move. My phone rang again. This time, it was the medical school dean's office. They needed to speak with me immediately about serious allegations regarding my degree. That was the moment I realized the full scope of their operation. They weren't just attacking my current job. They were trying to revoke my diploma. They were trying to take away the very foundation of my identity. The drive back to the medical school took 3 hours. 3 agonizing hours on the highway, watching the skyline fade, while my mind raced through the worst-case scenarios. I had built my entire life around becoming a doctor. 8 years of school, the crushing $310,000 in debt. And now they were trying to take it all away with a handful of malicious, coordinated lies. Dean Margaret Sullivan, a tall, silver-haired woman known for her fairness, met me with a grave expression. "Ava, thank you for coming on such short notice. I'm sure you can imagine why I needed to see you. The plagiarism allegations. Dean Sullivan, I swear to you there's no truth to them. I would never falsify data or plagiarize anyone's work." She turned the papers toward me. "Someone has sent us very detailed allegations. They provided what appear to be email exchanges between you and a classmate, Jennifer, discussing sharing research data inappropriately." I scanned the printed emails. They looked chillingly real. My email address, Jennifer's address, timestamps, everything. But I had never sent these. I had never had that conversation. "These are forgeries," I said, the word catching in my throat. "Dean Sullivan, my brother Preston, runs a tech company. He has the skills to create something like this. Please, you have to believe me." "I want to believe you, Ava," she said softly, "but I have to follow protocol. The school must investigate any allegations of academic dishonesty, no matter the source." The consequences were clear. My status as an alumna was under review. If proven true, my degree could be revoked. I was in a state of professional limbo. "Even if we prove these allegations are false," the dean continued, her face etched with regret, "the damage to your reputation has already been done. Your professional references are being contacted. People are talking." I felt the sickness returning. 3 weeks, possibly longer, for the investigation. Every day I wasn't in residency, I was falling behind. And even if I were cleared, who would hire a resident investigated for academic fraud? But there was a glimmer of light. Dr. Alan Reed, my research mentor, had already volunteered to help with the investigation. He was confident he could prove my work was original. That was something, a single, small flag of hope in the suffocating darkness. I left her office, the weight of the investigation pressing down on me, knowing that the most terrifying battle, the one for my professional identity, was just beginning. I drove back to Schuyler's apartment feeling hollow. My phone was a constant source of stress, buzzing with notifications, messages from former classmates asking if the rumors were true, and even a devastating email from a hospital where I had interviewed the previous year, rescinding their standing offer simply due to the ongoing public concerns. The rumor mill in the medical community was ruthlessly efficient, and my reputation was being shredded in real time. That evening, I let myself really cry for the first time. Not quiet tears, but a raw, desperate sobbing that shook my entire body. I cried for the 8 years of work being erased, for the $310,000 in debt that now felt pointless, and for the future that was crumbling to dust. Skylar found me and sat down, pulling me into a hug. "Oh, Ava, what happened today?" I told her everything. The dean, the fake emails, the online forum discussions calling me unstable. By the time I finished, Skylar was shaking with anger. "This is insane. We have to fight back. We have to expose them." "How, Skylar?" "There's no proof they're behind it," I argued, defeated. "It's all anonymous, all circumstantial. I'm just a suspended resident with a family that says I'm crazy. They have money, lawyers, connections. I have nothing." "You have the truth," she countered fiercely, "and you have people who love you." Just then my phone rang. It was Eleanor. "Ava, sweetheart, I heard about the latest attack. George called me. He's been keeping tabs on your mother." Her voice was low and serious. "I want you to know I'm not just on your side. I'm going to hire you a lawyer. A good one. Someone who specializes in harassment and defamation. I mean it. I'll pay the retainer, whatever it costs." "Grandma, I can't ask you to do that. It's too much money. You're not asking, I'm offering. And I don't want to hear any arguments. What Victoria is doing is wrong, Ava. Someone needs to stop her. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about stopping a monster she's become." A tiny, necessary spark of hope ignited within me. Eleanor wasn't just my protector. She was my financier in this legal war. Within 2 days, I was sitting in the impressive wood-paneled office of Valerie Kane, a sharp-eyed attorney in her 50s who specialized in complex, white-collar harassment cases in downtown Boston. Eleanor's retainer had been accepted, and Valerie listened patiently as I recounted the entire bizarre story. "This is a clear, escalating pattern of malicious harassment, Ava," Valerie concluded, tapping her pen. "The problem, as you noted, is the proof. Everything's been done anonymously or through third parties. But we can start building a case now. We'll file for a restraining order based on the pattern of behavior, document every incident, and wait for them to slip up and leave a digital or legal footprint." "What about the plagiarism investigation?" I asked, that wound still the deepest. "That's trickier. Your medical school has to follow its own process. But I can help you prepare your defense. Do you have all of your original research materials?" "All of it. I keep backups of everything." "Good. We need to prove those emails are forgeries. We'll get a tech expert to examine them. I know someone who can help." For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of professional control. Valerie knew how to navigate this world of high-stakes legal manipulation that Damon and Preston were so comfortable in. But then, as always seemed to be the case, the situation deteriorated dramatically. Valerie's investigator discovered something terrifying. Before the bank freeze, someone had initiated electronic transfers out of my accounts. Over $15,000 was missing. How is that possible? I stared at the bank statements. "Someone had your account information and security details," Valerie explained grimly. "They transferred the money out in small, untraceable amounts over several days to avoid triggering fraud alerts. Then they reported the suspicious activity themselves to cover their tracks and lock the accounts. It's an inside job, likely executed by the person who knew your identity, theft profile." I was numb. They had not only locked me out of my money, they had stolen it. "Can I get it back?" "Eventually, but you'll need to file extensive fraud claims with the bank, and those take 30 to 60 days to process. You know you don't have that kind of time." Despite this devastating financial blow, there was one piece of good news. Dr. Alan Reed, my research mentor, worked with extraordinary speed. Within a week, he had compiled all of my original research materials, complete with his own supervision notes, timestamps, and drafts, and presented it all to Dean Sullivan with a detailed forensic report. The plagiarism allegations were officially and thoroughly dismissed. The fake emails were identified as sophisticated forgeries. Dean Sullivan called me personally, sounding genuinely relieved. "Ava, I'm so glad to tell you this. You have been completely exonerated. I'm writing a formal letter to St. Jude's Medical Center defending you and explaining the situation immediately." I should have been ecstatic. Instead, I just felt a profound, heavy exhaustion. The academic war was won, but the professional war raged on, and I had a terrible premonition about the next inevitable step. The news of my complete exoneration from the medical school should have been the end of the nightmare. It should have been the moment St. Jude's Medical Center called me back, apologized, and eagerly welcomed their highly rated resident. Instead, when I called Dr. Shaw, her voice was laced with guilt and sadness. "Ava, I'm so glad the allegations were disproven. And I want you to know I shared the dean's letter with the entire board. I truly fought for you to return immediately. I heard the fatal, but coming, a sonic boom of professional bureaucracy. But the hospital administration has made the decision to terminate your residency position." The line felt silent, the air knocked out of my lungs. What? Why? I was cleared. I didn't do anything wrong. "I know. They know that too," she admitted softly. "But they feel that the situation has created too much disruption, too much drama. They're concerned about the hospital's reputation and the potential for ongoing, unpredictable issues with your family. Ava, this is the hardest conversation I've had all year. They've suggested you reapply next year." Next year. The damage wasn't just to my application, it was to my psyche. It was the ultimate betrayal. I did everything right, I proved my innocence, yet I was still punished. The malicious attacks had achieved their goal. They hadn't needed to prove I was guilty. They only needed to prove I was trouble. My family had won the campaign to erase me from the East Coast medical community without ever leaving a fingerprint. "I understand," I finally said, the words dry and hollow. "Thank you for trying, Dr. Shaw." I hung up the phone and sat in Skylar's living room, staring at the wall. My family had succeeded. They had destroyed my career, and the vast, complicated system of professional medicine had, however reluctantly, acted as their accomplice. That night, I felt a desperate need to drive, just to clear my head of the suffocating defeat. I drove aimlessly, eventually finding myself on the street where my new, now terminated apartment lease was. The street was quiet, dark, and felt foreign to me now. As I pulled a U-turn, I noticed a car parked down the street, slightly hidden in the shadows of a large oak tree. It was a familiar, expensive, dark sedan. My father's car. My heart hammered again, not with fear, but with a cold realization. They weren't just attacking me legally, they were physically watching me. They wanted me to know they were still there, still in control. They were not stopping. I pulled out my phone, quickly took a photo of the vehicle and its license plate, and sent it immediately to Valerie Kane. "They're stalking me now. This is my father's car." Valerie's response was immediate. "Document everything. We are filing for that restraining order tomorrow. This is the evidence we needed." The surveillance was horrifying, but it strengthened my resolve. They wanted me broken and back under their thumb. That was the only way they would stop. I would rather be broke and homeless than give them that satisfaction. But the next morning brought yet another crisis, one that put the entire legal battle on hold. I woke up to a call from Uncle George, my father's quiet, distant brother who lived out of state but had remained close with Eleanor. Ava, you need to come to the hospital. Now, your grandmother had a stroke. Everything stopped. The financial stress, the job loss, the stalking, it all faded into insignificance. Is she okay, Uncle George? Which hospital? She's stable, Ava. She's going to recover, but it was serious. St. Mary's Hospital. Drive carefully. I rushed to the hospital. Eleanor was in the ICU, hooked up to monitors, but awake and lucid. When she saw me, she tried to smile, the effort slightly distorting her features. "Don't you dare feel guilty about this," she said, her words slightly slurred but entirely understandable. "I'm old. These things happen." But I did feel guilty. The stress of the past few weeks, the legal battles, the fighting with Victoria, it had to have taken a toll on her. I stayed with her for hours, holding her hand, watching the machines beep. Uncle George arrived that evening and pulled me aside in the hallway, his face etched with worry and a quiet anger. "Victoria's already making moves, Ava," he whispered, glancing nervously towards Eleanor's room. "She filed for emergency guardianship of Eleanor this morning. She's claiming Mom is incapacitated and can't make her own decisions. But she just had a stroke. She's lucid. She's talking and aware." "I know, but Victoria's trying to get control of Eleanor's finances. If she succeeds, that means no more money for your legal defense. No money for Valerie Kane." My sickness returned, a cold, empty feeling in my stomach. This was the ultimate low. Victoria was using her own mother's severe medical crisis as a financial opportunity to crush me. Can she do that? She's trying, but I'm contesting it, and so are several other family members who still have a conscience. We're not going to let her steal from her own mother, not when she needs protection most. I realized that the battle had fundamentally shifted. It was no longer about my career. It was about protecting the only person in the world who had ever truly loved and supported me. My new fight was for Eleanor's independence, and by extension, my own future. The next week was a blur of high-stakes activity that felt more like a political campaign than a legal battle. My life became a cycle of hospital visits to Eleanor, conference calls with Valerie Kane, and strategy sessions with Uncle George. The urgency of the situation forced me to put my medical suspension on a shelf. I still had bills to pay, and now I had legal fees that Eleanor might not be able to cover if Victoria succeeded. With the help of a former professor, I found a part-time job as a medical consultant for a healthcare compliance company. It wasn't the grueling, life-saving work of a residency, but it paid the bills and, crucially, kept my medical knowledge current. I was working 40 hours a week while simultaneously dealing with lawyers and court dates. It was pure survival. The emotional strain was immense. Visiting Eleanor was the only balm. She was progressing well in recovery, her determination overriding the effects of the stroke. She understood exactly what Victoria was attempting. "That woman has no shame, Ava," Eleanor told me one afternoon, her voice still weak, but her eyes sharp. "She wants my money. She always has. But I have my wits about me, and George is fighting her tooth and nail." Uncle George became my closest ally. He was a quiet, unassuming engineer from Portland, but he possessed a fierce sense of family justice. He gathered testimonies from Eleanor's doctors, proving her cognitive competence, and worked tirelessly with Valerie Kane on the restraining order case. The day of the restraining order hearing finally arrived. It was a sterile, unforgiving environment at the local courthouse, and the atmosphere was thick with tension. Valerie Kane, my formidable lawyer, presented our evidence meticulously: the documented pattern of harassment, the anonymous false reports to the hospital and landlord, the stolen funds, the photographic proof of their surveillance outside Schuyler's apartment. It was a comprehensive narrative of calculated malice. Victoria, of course, played the perfect victim. She cried softly on the stand, talking about how much she missed her daughter, how worried she was about my mental state, and how she just wanted her family back together. It was a performance that would have earned her an Oscar nomination. She was convincing, heartbroken, and utterly manipulative. But Valerie was better. She introduced the phone records, showing the number of times my parents had tried to contact me after I had explicitly asked them to stop. She had Schuyler and Uncle George testify about the emotional and professional harassment, the sheer volume and coordination of the attacks, all directed at my livelihood, told a story no amount of crocodile tears could erase. The judge, a stern but fair woman, listened carefully. She granted the temporary restraining order. Victoria and Arthur were required to stay 500 feet away from me at all times. They could not contact me directly or through any third parties. Violation would result in immediate arrest. Victoria lost control completely. When the judge announced the ruling, she stood up, her face twisted with a frightening mixture of rage and shock. "You ungrateful, spoiled child!" she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me across the courtroom. "You have destroyed your family. You've poisoned everyone against us." The judge immediately threatened her with contempt, and a bailiff moved toward her. It was the first time I had seen my mother look truly unhinged, losing the carefully constructed facade she wore for society. And in that terrifying moment, I realized something crucial. She wasn't angry because I had left. She was terrified because she had lost control. Her power over me was gone, and that was her deepest fear realized. The fight for Eleanor's guardianship also concluded successfully. The doctors confirmed she was perfectly competent to make her own decisions, and Victoria's petition was dismissed with a sharp reprimand from the court. Eleanor recovered well from the stroke and was discharged to a high-end rehabilitation facility. And then something truly surprising happened. Valerie Kane, fueled by the evidence she had just presented, filed a countersuit against my parents for harassment, stalking, malicious interference with my career, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She had a mountain of documented evidence. My brother Damon, recognizing he had crossed ethical lines by using his legal connections to help his parents harass me, quietly withdrew as their counsel. Victoria and Arthur were forced to hire an outside attorney. The new lawyer, seeing the strength of Valerie's case, immediately advised them to drop their initial, frivolous defamation lawsuit against me. The lawsuit was officially dismissed. The first wave of active attacks had stopped. The restraining order was permanent. My reputation was still damaged, but the legal hammer had finally fallen on them. For the first time in months, I could breathe. I still didn't have a residency. I still had massive debt and a part-time job that barely covered the essentials. But the tide had turned. I was safe, and the woman who loved me most was safe too. But the root of their malice still felt incomplete, and I knew George was still digging for the final, shocking truth. 2 days after the restraining order was issued and the defamation suit was dismissed, Uncle George called me. "Ava, I'm at the airport. I flew in from Portland. We need to talk about what's really going on with your mother. Not over the phone. Can we meet?" I agreed instantly. His voice held a level of controlled anger and urgency that transcended the legal battles. We met at a quiet coffee shop in a neutral neighborhood outside the city. George looked older, burdened, but his eyes were sharp and filled with a rare, protective energy. He ordered us both coffee, then pulled out a thin manila folder from his briefcase, placing it on the table between us. "Ava, I need to tell you something, and it's going to make everything that happened make a terrifying kind of sense. You deserve to know the truth about why your mother has been so vicious." "I'm ready, Uncle George." I spent the last few weeks calling in favors. I asked a lot of questions and looked at public records, especially regarding the guardianship case and Arthur's business history. He began. "What I found was worse than I expected. Your parents are broke, Ava. Not just struggling to make ends meet. Completely, utterly broke." He opened the folder and slid the documents toward me. Bank statements, credit reports, legal filings related to failed corporate entities. Arthur's business venture failed catastrophically 2 years ago, but they've been hiding it. They're hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. They are on the verge of losing their house in the Hamptons. They've been living entirely off credit cards, lines of credit, and large loans from Damon and Preston, trying desperately to maintain the appearance of success. I stared at the numbers. It was a dizzying amount of debt, hidden beneath layers of expensive suits and country club memberships. It explained the desperation, but not the cruelty. I don't understand. What does their financial ruin have to do with me? George pulled out another document, a copy of grandmother Eleanor's current will. "Eleanor is worth about $6 million, Ava. She changed her will 5 years ago, right after Victoria tried to manipulate her into giving money for one of Arthur's disastrous early investments. In the old will, Victoria was the sole beneficiary. In the current will, Victoria only gets 20% of the estate. You, Ava, get 50%. The rest goes to other grandchildren and charities." My hands went cold. I had no idea. I had never asked about Eleanor's finances, focusing only on my own independence. "Victoria knows," George confirmed, his voice grave. "She's known for years, and she's been trying everything to either get Eleanor to change it back or to get guardianship so she can control the money before Eleanor passes. She is desperate." The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, connecting every single horrible event of the last few months into a single, cohesive, monstrous plot. "She wanted me broken," I stated slowly, the truth settling like a stone in my stomach. "She didn't just want me dependent on them so she could manipulate me emotionally. She wanted me dependent so she could control me and stop me from inheriting." "Exactly," George confirmed. "When you cut them off at the dinner, they panicked. That's why every single attack since then has been calculated to destroy your independence. If you have no career, no money, no home, you'd have to come crawling back. Then they could manipulate you into siding with them about Eleanor's will, or even worse, convince Eleanor that you are so unstable and unbalanced that you shouldn't be trusted with inheritance. The plagiarism accusations, the bank fraud, the harassment, all of it was designed to make me look unfit, unstable, and financially incompetent. If Eleanor believed I was having a professional and mental breakdown, she might easily change the will to protect the money from my reckless hands. "They've been systematically trying to destroy me for money," I whispered, the sickening truth making me feel like I might vomit. "I'm sorry, Ava. I'm so sorry I didn't see this sooner," George said, his eyes filled with genuine shame. "I've been on the other side of the country, but when Eleanor had her stroke and told me about your legal battles, I had to look into it." He confirmed that Eleanor knew everything about her daughter's desperate financial situation and was furious. "She's talking about cutting Victoria out entirely now. She said she'd rather give the entire estate to you and a charity than let Victoria have another dollar to enable Arthur." The weight of the last few months, the profound sense of loss and confusion, was suddenly lifted, replaced by a cold, hard rage. I wasn't fighting an emotional family drama anymore. I was fighting financial criminals who used family loyalty as a weapon. This knowledge gave me a clarity and resolve far stronger than any probationary status could ever break. I was no longer fighting for a career. I was fighting to protect the legacy and the honor of the one person who had stood by me. The discovery of my parents' bankruptcy and their inheritance motive galvanized Valerie Kane. Our countersuit against Victoria and Arthur for malicious interference and intentional infliction of emotional distress suddenly became a powerhouse case. We weren't fighting against a grieving family. We were fighting against fraudsters trying to protect their last financial asset. Valerie used George's financial research as the cornerstone of our strategy. The information, the hundreds of thousands in debt, the fraudulent business dealings, the timing of the guardianship filing, painted a damning picture of calculated, premeditated malice. When the judge saw the full evidence package, the narrative shifted from family dispute to professional and financial sabotage. Damon, my lawyer brother, saw the writing on the wall. He had used his legal connections to assist the harassment, but now, faced with the ethical implications of his parents' financial deceit, he officially withdrew as their counsel. He knew this was a losing, reputation-destroying battle. Victoria and Arthur were forced to retain a new, high-priced lawyer. This one, unlike Damon, advised them based on cold legal reality. Their defamation lawsuit against me was now indefensible. It was quickly dismissed. The final, climatic confrontation occurred over the settlement of our countersuit. We didn't want money. We wanted peace and protection. In the mediation room, which felt like a cold, gray bunker, Victoria sat across from me, her face pinched and white, looking years older than she had at my graduation dinner. Her new lawyer spoke on her behalf, attempting to minimize the damage. Valerie, however, was relentless. She outlined every single incident. The initial false reports that cost me my residency, the bank fraud that stole my savings, the landlord coercion, and the physical surveillance. She linked every attack back to their imminent bankruptcy and their failed attempt to seize Eleanor's assets. My clients are prepared to offer a full and complete severance, Valerie announced. They will pay all of Dr. Sterling's outstanding legal fees, agree to never contact her again, directly or indirectly, and sign a legally binding document acknowledging their campaign of harassment. Victoria's lawyer tried to negotiate the terms, suggesting a softer agreement. Valerie was having none of it. This is the only path forward. Anything less, and we will take this to trial and expose the financial ruin and ethical misconduct of your clients to the public. Dr. Sterling's reputation may be damaged, but theirs will be destroyed forever. Victoria stared at me across the table, not with rage, but with a vacant despair. She was beaten. She had gambled her last piece of leverage, the appearance of family loyalty, and lost everything. The papers were signed. My parents were required to pay my legal fees and sign a permanent, binding agreement to cease all contact. The legal chapter of my life was finally closed, and I had emerged not just alive, but victorious. My bank finally concluded their fraud investigation shortly after. Their forensics confirmed that someone with detailed inside information had indeed accessed my accounts and initiated the transfers before reporting the suspicious activity. They couldn't name the culprit, but they restored every dollar that had been stolen. I had my financial cushion back. The guardianship petition was permanently rejected. Eleanor, now fully recovered from her stroke, was discharged to a luxurious, independent living facility, somewhere she had help but retained total control of her affairs. I sat down with Eleanor a few days later, tears welling up as I looked at her, frail but fiercely independent. "You saved me, Grandma," I told her, holding her hand. "Nonsense, Ava," she said, squeezing back. "You saved yourself. I just provided the armor. What you did at that dinner, walking away, that's the bravest thing I've ever seen. You earned this peace." I still didn't have a residency, but I had my health, my money, my freedom, and the fierce loyalty of my chosen family, Schuyler, George, and Eleanor. The active attacks had stopped. The weight of the world, which had been crushing me, had finally been lifted. I kept working at the consulting job, and I started regular therapy to process the trauma. I was doing the long, slow work of rebuilding my life from the rubble. 2 months later, an email arrived that changed everything. It was from Dr. Lena Rodriguez, the residency director at Golden Gate Medical Center in the San Francisco Bay Area. "Dear Dr. Sterling, I recently heard about your situation from Dr. Evelyn Shaw, who felt terrible about how things ended at St. Jude's Medical Center. She reached out to several of her colleagues, advocating on your behalf. After reviewing your exemplary record, speaking with your references at medical school, and learning what you've been through, I would like to offer you a position in our residency program starting in 3 months. San Francisco, all the way across the country. A chance to start completely over. A clean slate, 3,000 miles away from the toxicity." I called Schuyler immediately. This wasn't just a new job, it was a passport to a new life. The offer from Golden Gate Medical Center in the San Francisco Bay Area felt like a divine intervention, a reward for surviving the crucible. It was a prestigious residency, possibly even better than the one I had lost. But the excitement was tempered by a deep-seated fear. What if they follow me? I asked Schuyler, standing amidst the half-packed boxes in her living room. Residency positions are public record. What if they find me and it all starts again? The restraining order is only valid in Massachusetts. Then you fight back again, Ava. But you can't let them take your dreams away, Schuyler argued, her voice full of conviction. You've worked too hard. You deserve this. I called Eleanor next. She was recovering beautifully, her mind sharper than ever, and her voice carried the weight of a powerful matriarch. Take it, Ava, she said, her tone firm. Take it and don't look back. Victoria can't hurt you anymore. The restraining order, the failed lawsuit, George and I watching her every move. She knows she's lost. Go be a doctor, sweetheart. It's what you were meant to do. Her permission, her blessing, was all the validation I needed. The fear didn't vanish, but it was overshadowed by a burning, unshakable determination to claim the life I had nearly lost. I accepted the offer. 2 weeks before my scheduled move, a package arrived at Schuyler's apartment addressed to me. There was no return address, but I recognized the elegant, expensive paper immediately. Inside was the family heirloom necklace I'd left on the table at the graduation dinner. Tucked beneath it was a small, handwritten note from my mother. You always took what wasn't yours. You don't deserve this. You will fail. I stared at the note for a long time. The old Ava, the one conditioned to feel guilt and inadequacy, would have been paralyzed by fear, questioning every decision. But that person no longer existed. I had survived a systematic attempt on my professional life. A spiteful note from a defeated woman held no power over me. I placed the necklace, along with my father's bracelet, in a small box and put it in my storage unit. I didn't need their approval. their wealth, or their symbols. I needed to pack. The next day, I visited Eleanor at her facility. She had one last gift for me. "I'm giving you a check for $100,000, Ava," she announced, pressing a heavy envelope into my hands. "Don't argue. It's a gift, not a loan. Use it to start your new life in the Bay Area. Get a nice apartment, buy what you need, have a cushion while you settle in." I started to protest, overwhelmed by her generosity, but she held up a hand. "Ava, I'm 81 years old. I have more money than I could ever spend. And you know what? Watching you stand up to Victoria, watching you refuse to break no matter what she threw at you, that's made me prouder than anything else in my life. You're the granddaughter I always hoped you'd be. Strong, principled, brave. Let me help you. It would make me so happy." I accepted the gift, and it didn't feel like obligation. It felt like a declaration of war against my past. Schuyler threw me a goodbye party. Eleanor, supported by a walker, but smiling fiercely, was the guest of honor. George flew in from Portland. It was a small, intimate gathering of the people who genuinely cared, the people who had fought for me. "To Ava," Schuyler said, raising her glass, "who showed us all what real strength looks like." I moved to the Bay Area 2 weeks later. The drive across the country took 4 days, and every mile felt like shedding a layer of the past. I listened to podcasts, stopped at roadside diners, and slept in budget hotels. By the time I reached California, I felt lighter than I had in years. I found a beautiful one-bedroom apartment near the hospital, with a glimpse of the Pacific Ocean. I used Eleanor's money to buy new, sturdy furniture, professional clothes for my residency, and things I had always considered luxuries, like quality running shoes and a real coffee maker. Golden Gate Medical Center welcomed me with open arms. Dr. Rodriguez was warm and supportive. My fellow residents were friendly and talented. Nobody knew about the past drama. I was simply Dr. Ava, the new resident from the East Coast. I worked hard, harder than ever, in the emergency department, learning from incredible attending physicians, treating patients, and saving lives. And I loved every exhausting minute of it. For the first time in my life, I felt truly, genuinely happy. I was building a life entirely on my own terms, 3,000 miles from the toxicity that had nearly consumed me. I knew the battle was not entirely over, but I was standing on solid ground now, and I was ready for anything. 18 months passed in a glorious, exhausting blur. I excelled in my residency program, becoming a favorite among the attending physicians, and my patient reviews were stellar. I was publishing research again, this time focused on emergency trauma protocols. Everything I had worked for was finally happening, but this time it was built on a foundation of self-respect and the unwavering support of my chosen family. I had built a wonderful life in the Bay Area. I was dating Ethan, a kind and funny nurse, and we were talking about moving in together. I had adopted a rescue mutt named Charlie who greeted me every day like I was a superhero. I had video calls with Eleanor every Sunday, and Uncle George visited twice a year. The trauma was still there, but it was being processed weekly in therapy, turning from a burning wound into a manageable scar. Then, one quiet Tuesday afternoon, an email arrived. The sender was Damon. The subject line was stark: "Mom is sick." I stared at it for a long time, the familiar cold dread coiling in my gut. I opened it. "Ava," Damon wrote, "ignoring the permanent restraining order and the settlement agreement, I know we're not supposed to contact you, but this is important. Mom has been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. She's starting treatment next week. She's been asking for you. She says she's sorry for everything that happened and wants to make amends. A note from my father Arthur, was added at the bottom. Please come home. She needs you. We all miss you. I read the email 3 times. The old guilt, the old obligation. But she's your mother, whispering in my ear. I didn't respond immediately. I closed my laptop and walked away, needing distance to think. The timing was too neat, the emotional leverage too perfect. I had to ground myself in reality, not the fantasy of a deathbed reconciliation. I called Eleanor. Grandma, did you know about Victoria's diagnosis? I did, sweetheart. She called me last week. Eleanor's voice, though sympathetic to her daughter's plight, was perfectly clear. Ava, I'm sorry she's sick, I truly am. But you need to know something. She's not sorry. She's scared and wants support, but she hasn't changed. She's using this illness to try to guilt you into coming back. How do you know? Because she called me trying to use the cancer diagnosis to get me to change my will. Said she needed financial security for her medical treatments, and that you should understand, since you're a doctor. Eleanor scoffed. I told her no. I also told her that trying to manipulate me while she's sick was particularly low. That was the clarity I needed. The same clarity I'd felt on that dreadful graduation night. Victoria wasn't seeking forgiveness. She was seeking a nurse, a financial safety net, and a dramatic final act to control. Thank you for telling me, Grandma. What are you going to do? What I need to do for myself. I opened my laptop and typed a response to Damon. It was the hardest email I had ever written, requiring the full strength of the boundaries I had spent 2 years building. Damon, I'm sorry to hear about Victoria's illness. I hope she responds well to treatment and makes a full recovery. However, I meant what I said 18 months ago. I do not exist to you. I am not your daughter, your sister, or your family member anymore. That door was closed permanently when you chose to systematically destroy my life rather than respect my boundaries. Please do not contact me again. I wish you all well, but from a distance. I hit send. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, I blocked Damon's email address. I didn't feel heartless. I felt free. I was choosing self-preservation over a final, toxic exposure. Eleanor called me that night. Victoria called me crying. Said you refused to see her. She's telling everyone you're heartless. I'm okay with that, Grandma. Let her tell whoever she wants, whatever she wants. I'm 3,000 miles away, living my life, and she can't touch me anymore. Good. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. The months passed peacefully. I heard through Uncle George that Victoria's treatment was going well and that she was likely to recover fully. I was glad. I didn't wish her harm, but I certainly didn't want her in my life. Damon sent one more email, which I didn't open, and then nothing. They finally got the message. The chapter of their influence was permanently closed. I had passed the final test of my own resolve, proving that my new life was stronger than the old guilt. 3 years after that disastrous graduation dinner, I was standing in front of a mirror in a large hotel ballroom in Chicago, adjusting my name tag. Dr. Ava Sterling, emergency medicine specialist. I was attending a national medical conference, about to present research I had conducted on trauma protocols in emergency departments. My life looked nothing like the scared, broke, and suspended resident I had been 3 years prior. I had finished my residency at Golden Gate Medical Center with honors, top of my class. I completed a prestigious fellowship in emergency medicine and was now working as an attending physician in their ED. I was teaching residents, conducting research, and saving lives every day. I had a beautiful apartment overlooking the water. Charlie was the best dog a doctor could ask for, and Ethan and I had been talking seriously about marriage. My life felt stable, meaningful, and entirely mine. I hadn't spoken to Victoria, Arthur, Damon, or Preston in 3 years. The restraining order was now permanent, and the peace was absolute. I heard through George that their financial situation had stabilized somewhat, and Victoria had recovered from her cancer. I felt nothing about it, not satisfaction, not anger. They were simply strangers I used to know in another, painful life. Eleanor, now 84, was still sharp and healthy. We talked every week. She had done one last symbolic thing. She had updated her will to leave me 60% of her $6 million estate and cut Victoria to 10%. She got her inheritance early in all the money I spent on your legal defense, Eleanor had joked dryly. Uncle George and I had grown close, forming a genuine, loving relationship outside of the toxic family context. He visited California twice a year, and we'd have long dinners where he'd give me neutral updates, respecting my choice to remain distant. Skylar was thriving, finishing up her residency in pediatrics, and was already planning to be my maid of honor. As I stood in that conference ballroom, waiting to give my presentation, I thought about the scared young woman I'd been. I had been so sure I'd made a terrible, irreversible mistake by walking away, so certain I had lost everything. Instead, I had gained everything. Just then, a distant cousin, Emily, approached me in the hallway during a break. She had been at that graduation dinner, a quiet observer. We hadn't spoken since. "Ava? Oh my God, it is you. I've wanted to talk to you for years," she said, her eyes shining. "Hi, Emily. I just wanted to say what you did that night at the Hawthorne Club, walking away from Victoria and Arthur. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen, and it changed my life." I was stunned. How so? I was stuck in a toxic relationship with my own parents, not as bad as yours, but bad enough. Watching you set that boundary, watching you hold it no matter what they threw at you, it inspired me. I got therapy. I set my own boundaries. My life is so much better now. So thank you. She hugged me quickly and walked away. I stood there, tears welling up, good tears this time. I had never thought about my actions affecting anyone else. I had only been trying to survive. But maybe that was the ultimate power of setting a boundary. It gives permission to others to do the same. My presentation went beautifully. The research was well received, and several colleagues approached me with opportunities for collaboration. My career was everything I had hoped it would be. That evening, I called Eleanor from my hotel room. "How did it go, sweetheart?" she asked. "It was amazing, Grandma. Everything is amazing. You sound happy. Really happy." "I am. I really, truly am." "Good. You deserve it, Ava. After everything you've been through, you deserve all the happiness in the world." A few months later, I was getting ready for work when I caught my reflection in the mirror. I was wearing my scrubs, my stethoscope around my neck, my hair pulled back. I looked exactly like what I was, a successful emergency medicine physician at the top of her field. Around my neck was the family heirloom necklace. Eleanor had given it to me permanently after Victoria's failed attempt to reclaim it. "It should go to someone who represents the best of our family, Ava," she had said. "That's you." Now it meant something different. It wasn't about Victoria's approval or family obligation. It was about Eleanor's fierce love and my own hard-won strength. It was a reminder of how far I had come. I touched the necklace and smiled at my reflection. "You did it," I whispered to myself. "You became exactly who you were meant to be." And I walked out the door to go save lives, free at last. I learned something profound through all of this. something I want everyone struggling with a toxic family to know. Sometimes the greatest act of love you can give yourself is walking away from people who refuse to love you back. You don't owe anyone access to your life, not even family, especially not family who use that relationship to hurt you. Blood doesn't make family. Love, respect, and support do. When you choose yourself, when you set boundaries and hold them no matter what, you make space for real love, real success, and real peace. The people who truly love you will respect your boundaries. The people who don't weren't really loving you in the first place. It won't be easy. It might be the hardest thing you ever do. But on the other side of that difficulty is freedom, a life that is truly yours, and that life is worth fighting for. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with toxic family members? How did you find the courage to choose yourself? Or what advice would you give to someone struggling with a similar situation right now? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know it was long, but these things, the real, hard things in life, they don't have simple explanations. They're messy, complicated, and painful, but they also lead to growth, strength, and freedom. Take care of yourselves out there. Set those boundaries. Choose your peace. Build your chosen family, and never, ever let anyone make you feel like you're not enough, exactly as you are.